Now that our topics are showing up as tables in our Snowflake Open Catalog, we'd like to view this data inside of Snowflake. I'll be following these directions here in the Snowflake documentation. Query a table in Snowflake Open Catalog using Snowflake. As the prerequisites show here, we need to have an iceberg table registered with Open Catalog, which we've already done, and a service connection that Snowflake can use to connect to Open Catalog. In a previous video, we already did do setup connections shown here in the lower right. I'm going to actually reuse those credentials for this exercise. So the first thing we need to do is create an external volume in Snowflake. It says if you don't already have one, start by creating an external volume in Snowflake by following these directions. If I follow this Amazon S3 link here, we'll end up on this page. The main thing here is that you need to create an IAM policy that grants access to the S3 location. Now you would think that you might be able to reuse one of the roles that we've already created. However, when it shows here for the resource and the ARN here, I'm going to need to use the base bucket, whereas I believe previously the policy that we used to get into this bucket had more in the path. When I've tried to use the longer path, we actually end up getting a list error in Snowflake. And I'll show you what step you would get that error in. So here I'm actually going to create a new role, as well as, or a new policy here, as well as a new role that we're going to be using for getting Snowflake into that S3 bucket. So here in IAM, I've created a role, and for the policy here, I've given it permissions on the bucket here, as well as here, with nothing else further in the path. Then I'm going to follow step 4 here of create an external volume in Snowflake. Let's head over to the SQL query where I complete that step. And then once I do that, I'm also going to retrieve the AWS IAM role for the Snowflake account, and I'll grant it permissions to the access bucket. After we complete those 3 steps, we'll have to verify the storage access. So I've already executed these, but showing exactly what that will look like in Snowflake, here I'm going to create an external volume. And we will be referencing this in the later steps. And then I'm going to create a storage location based off of S3. Here's the base storage location that I care about. So this one goes to the compaction folder. But the permissions I need to give it in the policy are just the base bucket. And then here's the ARN that was created, that we just created inside for the role inside of AWS. And then I did decide to use an external ID. Once you execute that, you can then describe the external volume. So if I go ahead and execute this, when I go to name here, there's going to be an ARN that we need. And I believe it's the storage AWS IAM user ARN. And that's going to be this one here. You're going to need to copy that. Once you have that user ARN, you can go back to your role and go to the trust relationship, and you'll paste that in here. I've already done that, but otherwise I believe it will say root here. Before you've gone ahead and pasted that in. Now that we've completed those final permissions, we can verify storage access. So executing the verify storage access here, it will say success true. Now I have seen that this does say success false when you give that policy access not to the root of the S3 bucket again, but to some other path that's further in there. So you do need to see success true before you continue. That finishes the directions for an external volume for Amazon S3. Again, we created the external volume to the compaction folder. Any topics that we now create will be part of this one external volume. So you only need to do this once, and then now we'll be able to move on to the next steps. Going back to query a table in Snowflake Open Catalog using Snowflake, we've now completed step 1, create an external volume. So next we're going to create a catalog integration for Open Catalog. This is going to make a link between Snowflake and the Snowflake Open Catalog where we can already see the tables or topics. This is going to create this catalog integration, and we're calling it this. It's a Polaris integration with an iceberg table format. You specified the warehouse as well as the namespace. So this is actually a single catalog integration for public default, but this one integration will store all of the topics. And then this is the catalog URI, being sure to include the Polaris API catalog at the end. For authentication, I'm going to use the OAuth client ID and OAuth client secret. Again, that is the client connection that we're reusing that we created in an earlier video. You would then need to execute this. Now that we have the catalog integration, we can move on to create an external managed table. For the external table, I give it a name and I use a catalog that I just created. This is the catalog integration, as well as a combination of the external volume so it knows where to get the data. The catalog table name is what I'm going to call it inside of Snowflake. So it could be a different name. And then again, you can place it in a different database than the name of the database and the schemas that it is inside of the open catalog. So in this case, it's going to go into training public. So if you were to execute this, if I go over to my databases on the far left, I can open training public. And when I go into tables, you'll see that there's a Kafka schema topic 4 showing up here. This corresponds to the topic or table that is in the warehouse StreamNative public default. So StreamNative public default is now mapped to training public Kafka schema topic 4 through a combination of using the external volume and the catalog integration in an externally managed table. Now that we've created the externally managed table, we can query the table using Snowflake. And finally here, by doing a select star from training.public.Kafka schema topic 4 and limiting my results to 10, you can see the data is being read directly from the S3 bucket, but as a reference through the Snowflake open catalog.